Gather round, everyone. I'm here to tell the story you've come all this way to hear. Compiling this account has taken me a long time, and this is the first time it's been shared in its complete form, so you must understand my determination, humility, and slight trepidation as I begin the story of Kievan Stranik Gonkarov and his last month on Earth. We pick up our story of Kay, our boy of 18, on his way home through the market of the provincial town we find ourselves overlooking today. A vendor called out, "Kay!" But Kay had poor eyesight and he could not see the man, so he made a low bow and continued home. He carried a packet of dried rice, along with grains, legumes, and a small portion of beef, which he had procured from the stall owned and managed by his uncle on the far side of the market. That uncle was the brother of his father, younger by 2 years. The same went for Kay and his younger brother Alyosha, though a separation of 5 years stood between them. Alyosha had recently turned 13. Today, he had returned from a hunting retreat with his father. The food Kay carried was for his family's first meal together since their return. Kay began to ascend the steps that flowed from the gates of the market to the door of his home at the top of the hill. He traced the path the sun took along the sky, and eventually his eyes fell upon the small, glowing circle as it dipped below the horizon. What a day, Kay thought. The soreness of his back and arms was acute as he recollected the pull-ups he had done at dawn. The school day that followed was monotonous. A 2-hour class on orthodoxy lulled him despite what he did to keep attention. An hour lecture called A New Framework for Understanding Theoretical Cosmology was presented in a small auditorium in his school for a select portion of the senior class, followed by calculus. Then lunch was served lukewarm in a large gray room called the cafeteria. His final class of the day had been current events, which told of Stalin's generosity, emphasizing yesterday's marking of his highest recorded acceptance rating. Kay laughed inwardly and remarked mindlessly to a friend, "Yeah, right." The weight of all this caused his legs to drag behind him. He approached his front door and thought of how lucky he was to live in a house. Most of his friends lived in small apartments, but owing to the dowry of his mother and the career of his father, they were able to live in comfort compared to most at the time. The family possessed enough wealth so that the boys and their father could take a week off and retire to their lodge in the forest to hunt elk and reindeer. Kay walked into the kitchen and heard, "Where were you? I've been waiting for the beef and rice for—" "It's fine. Come here. Help me plate and pour water." Kay walked to his mother and kissed her lightly upon both cheeks, mimicked what he had seen a son do to his mama at an outdoor cafe in Paris. Kay set cups of water at the 4 wooden chairs crowding the table as his father walked in. The man was jovial and excited to see his family. The mother kissed her husband as she rushed to and fro in the kitchen, looking for some spices. "Sit down," she instructed her boys with a distinct tone only ever heard from a mother. "Dinner is ready." Their mother, Anastasia, sat down last. Each questioned the other on the happenings of their day while they ate, and the father and brother spoke about their trip in a humorous and pleasant way. After the meal, the parents sat around drinking coffee, and the young boy Alyosha ate a small piece of bread with honey. Much later that night, Ivan, the father of the family, beckoned for his eldest son to join him in his office. Ivan had been buoyant while he ate, but now he spoke in a low voice so that only Kay could hear him. "Son, allow me to tell you the story of what occurred yesterday in the forest." "Of course, Papa, please." "While your brother slept, I ventured for a walk. Out of the woods crawled an emaciated man in rags. They were gray and torn on the back, as if they had been ripped while climbing under a fence laden with spikes. The torn rags appeared to have been provided by some institution. A number patch on the front left shoulder read 19998. The man expelled the following to me in dramatic haste. "Is that a free man I see? Oh, thank God, a fellow man. Quick, are you a soldier?" "Nay, I have not seen a free man in many months, but I know one when I see one. Please help me. I am only strong enough for these few words. My strength has been siphoned from me." He clung to a tree for support, but this was not enough to hold up his weak body, and he fell to the ground at the feet of one of the tall giants with leafy locks and frost dandruff. He looked up at the sky as if looking into the face of God, and proclaimed, "I've seen the devil. No, not a man, men. A hypnotized group of starving, seeking men who have fallen under orders. A mass psychosis, a herd of men with fallen natures. I can tell you outright that although they claim orthodoxy, they claim to have no respect for the weight you carried on your back. The sins of the world are abundant in the motherland. I fear there is nothing to stop them from multiplying." He stumbled towards me, grabbing both my shoulders, bringing his face close to mine so that I could see the scars and marks of his face staring back at me. The whites of his eyes were a dirty yellow, and around his sockets lay dark rings from the depravity of sleep. His cheeks were sunken, and he seemed not to notice the cold, so that while I wore a heavy jacket, he wore just his thin gray uniform. The evidence was conclusive. This man was running from something significant. I was forced to turn my head to the left as he talked in my face with his fermented, stinking, rotten breath. "Please help," groaned the old man. Before I could respond, he slid down my front, clinging to my shoulders and dropping to his knees at my feet. He clung to the elbows of my jacket, staring up at me. Our eyes had been locked since the outset, but now there was a change in them. On his knees, he released his grip and looked up. With his final breath, he whispered, "The world is a dark place. Find the light within yourself." With this, the light in the eyes faded. The light in his eyes faded, and his body crumpled to the earth. I heard rumors in the hallway at school or camps where people were taken to work. I heard that they rape the women and purposely separate the families. I heard they dot Russia like stars in a black sky. None of which I believed, but now I see it's all true. A colleague of mine recently stopped coming into the office. I'd known him for years and found it odd when he so abruptly stopped coming in. I never said anything. Since the encounter in the forest, I've been racked with guilt. Am I complicit in his torture? How could you have known? What could you have done? What does one do when faced with a thing like this? That depends on who the thing faces. Kay and his father Ivan sat in silence for some time. Both thought of the dead man. It was late. This made the knocking at the front door all more surprising. They looked at each other with contorted faces. The knocking came a second time, with significantly more force. Ivan stood as confidently as he could, despite his unease, and walked out of the office towards the door. Kay trailed. The peephole was set slightly too high for Ivan, which forced him to lift his heels off the ground and stand at tiptoe at an angle against the door to see the source of the knocking. Two men in uniform stood on the stone front steps. Their features were inaccessible due to the dimness of the porch light, but the glow was enough to illuminate their towering statures, broad frames, and annoyance at having been kept waiting. "Open the door. We have come with an official message from the High Court." Their voices shook the house. "Go away," cried Ivan. "So you are home. You are not so special to have an entire night for yourselves. We have many more houses to get to. Open the door. If not, listen now. This is an official condemnation by the state. The boy of 18 has been found guilty of violating Article 58, counter-revolutionary activities. Kievan Shranik Gonkarov will be collected in 1 month. In my opinion, this is an abominable privilege of time. I would arrest him now, but I've been ordered to present exactly this ruling. It seems your standing in the town has afforded you this much. Also, if caught in an attempt to flee the town, police have been given complete authorization to shoot and kill the boy." "This is a mistake. My son has been home and has never broken any Article 58. "You are mistaken. I'm reading it directly. Kievan Shranik Gonkarov has been found guilty of violation of Article 58. "What are you talking about?" pleaded Ivan. "An incident in school. Your son knows of what we were saying. Really, that is it. We will return in 1 month times to kill the boy." Half coughing, half chuckling, the man said, "There is nothing more. Nothing needs to be discussed. Remember, you are being watched and that leaving means the boy's death too. Night and praise to the motherland." Stumbling back and finding no support, Kay collapsed in the dark room. He lay in a crumpled position in the small passage between the kitchen and the dining room, on the brink of unconsciousness. On the precipice of a high cliff, Kay looked frightfully out towards the mouth of a gaping abyss. Occasionally his eyes would flutter open, and he would see his saint, the saint who had devoted her entire life to him. Anastasia sobbed on the ground next to him in complete hysterics. Her voice broke with every other word. "Kievan, my Kievan, what is happening? Quickly, call for the doctor. Of course." "Nothing. Wretched. My calls go unanswered like my questions to you. What has taken hold of you? You say you are dying, and it seems as true, but where does the source of your suffering lie? Look at you. You can't speak. You are paralyzed by what? A thought? An injury? An attack of some sort? You appear untouched. Your skin is a sickly color, yes, but not jarringly so, as you would expect in an attack of this magnitude. Brain fever. Brain fever. How dare you even propose that? It's a temporary spasm of the mind. No, of the heart. This pain comes from the heart, not the mind. How can I heal a wound to the heart? How can I heal you, little one? My Kievan." At that moment, Ivan walked in the door. Go, cried Anastasia. Run, no, sprint, to the doctor. Sprint to the doctor and tell him our boy is dying. Push off from the roof with your talons and beat your wings and propel yourself along with Ivan. Fly low with him as he bounds down the hill towards the town. Your eyes are strong, you see through the mist, but Ivan could only see a few steps ahead of him. The fog hung low on the street, as if intending to make the journey more difficult. Ivan knows the practice is quite close, maybe a quarter or a third of a mile at most, yet seems to have trouble remembering precisely what street the doctor resides on. Running down the street, his jacket open and flying like a cape behind him, Ivan made a hard right onto the street. He believed the practice to reside on. He surged to the address and banged violently on the door. He looked around and found the street completely deserted. Ivan began banging loudly on the door. Ivan received no answer. This pattern continued until he had exhausted all the doors on that street. Panting, he ran to the residence of a colleague he thought might know the whereabouts of the doctor. He approached the door of his colleague in a state of absolute distress. The colleague received him not as a friend coming for a visit or for the signing of some important documents, but as a man in urgent trouble. Ivan, said the voice of a man, what's all this fuss? You're in a frenzy. Kiev, it's Kiev. He's fallen ill. We need Dr. Vygotsky. We need the doctor directly. Well, look no farther. There he is. Ivan turned to see the short, middle-aged, plump Dr. Vygotsky in his white doctor's smock, walking alone through the street. Doctor, doctor, Ivan cried. I need your assistance immediately. It's my son. He's had an attack, and he needs attention directly. Well, lead the way with haste. I shall attend to him directly. When Ivan and Dr. Vygotsky walked in the front door, Kay was breathing, but unconscious. The doctor rushed to the boy. A cold rag, Dr. Vygotsky called out, and a pillow for his head. From his jacket pocket, the doctor removed 2 small white pouches about 1 inch by 1 inch. He broke them at the center, as you would a pencil, directly in front of the boy's nostrils. An odorous vapor was released from the pouches, which traveled into the boy's 2 small nostrils, striking the olfactory sensory neurons, igniting the odor receptors in the brain, and initiating an elaborate cascade of electrochemical firing. With this, Kay released a great and awoke. Anastasia, Ivan, and the doctor were exuberant while the boy lay exhausted on the floor. Before we continue, however, I must tell you of the boy's mental affairs during this period of unconsciousness. We left him on the edge of that precipice almost an hour ago. He traveled quite a distance since then. In fact, it was approximately when Ivan had left in search of the doctor that Kay had fallen over the cliff and into the abyss.